My name is Kathy Biala, and I'm a resident of Marina. I'd like to let you all know that recently the environmental justice team headed by Sumi Silvaraja actually traveled to Marina to talk with our citizens and walk our pristine beaches. Thank you for your effort in including us. It is a well-known and serious problem that the wealthier, more politically connected, and resource-able project proponents and their allies are able to ignore, dominate, or somehow discredit disadvantaged communities and the small public agencies that represent them. This is why we presume you have committed to developing such a policy. The effect of this repeating pattern is that disadvantaged communities' resources, often exploited by others, they become the unfortunate last stop for NIMBY solutions. Residents don't get to live near the beaches and are asked to compromise their welfare for the good of privileged others, aren't given the same considerations to protect their natural resources, and are outnumbered and outspent by powerful opponents. Marina citizens would like to recommend criteria for an assessment tool. These are: 1, define disadvantaged community with the objective to apply environmental justice policy to appropriate entities. 2, verify applicable current legal rights to ensure that basic laws are complied with for disadvantaged communities. 3, apply community values to ensure equitable assessment and weight is given to community values of disadvantaged communities. 4, identify economic disadvantages to acknowledge and make transparent the influence and power advantages of corporations and its allies over disadvantaged communities. 5, apply best practice science to ensure that the Coastal Commission will utilize the best scientific data available in its decision-making process and does not give credence to flawed studies that did not use such methodologies. 6, ensure public participation and access to decision makers to ensure that disadvantaged communities have equal opportunity for receiving and giving information and having access to decision makers equivalent to the project applicants. And lastly, identify conflict of interest issues to evaluate conflicts that contributed to current and previous decisions resulting in disadvantaged communities not being fairly represented. It is our hope that there will be enough details in the assessment of the issues to have some real impact in decisions coming before this commission. Thank you for your kind attention, and please hear the details of important environmental justice issues from citizens who know. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and Commissioner Aminzadeh, thank you very much for your earlier inquiry and interest in the timeline of our issue. The adoption of an environmental justice policy is an incredibly important step towards protecting California's coast for the benefit of all, and we greatly appreciate the Coastal Commission's commitment to addressing this issue. As a first step, the Coastal Commission must define to which communities will the environmental justice policy apply and what it means to be disadvantaged. That is, by what criteria is a community disadvantaged, or how is injustice evidenced? We must identify communities that are directly impacted by a project under review and therefore will receive an assessment under this policy. We believe, however, that no single criteria should be used. Many different criteria should be applied, such as the EnviroScreen, U.S. Census data for racial, minority income status, comparative assessments that reflect any disparity between involved parties with financial advantages, historical information about communities that have shouldered the greatest burdens for regional hazardous facilities or affordable housing requirements, gentrification of urban development that would allow or that would force low-income residents to not live in coastal communities. All these as just some of your other considerations. This is not an easy task, but it is essential for this environmental justice policy. And we thank you all, everyone, for taking up this singular challenge.
Good afternoon. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have driven 3 hours to come up here today to speak with you. And I think it's especially relevant on this holiday, Hindu holiday of Diwali, that emphasizes knowledge over power, light over dark, and political fairness. Often disadvantaged communities are not able to recognize or insist on their legal rights, which can be specialized, complex, and the ramifications of which are not apparent to them at first. In this situation, it seems a project applicant can ignore such legal requirements or advance a project with misinformation or minimizing or creating misconceptions about legal requirements for the project. The Coastal Commission will not have the authority to grant any basic legal rights, as many permitting or licensing agencies do not. But a project being considered must show evidence of all fundamental legal rights under local, state, and federal law before such projects are considered. Any illegal project should never be granted permits, and an effective environmental justice policy should provide the resources to disadvantaged communities who insist their legal rights are being trampled, and a way of translating information to a format that specific disadvantaged communities can easily understand. We hope this policy will allow the commissioners to see the forest for the trees, and we hope the environmental justice policy will give a fair voice to the disadvantaged who don't have the same resources to have the same voice. We're also very appreciative of the environmental justice team coming to visit us out in Marina, and we thank them for that. Happy Diwali. Thank you.
I have two comments today about the environmental justice policy. Corporate profit projects usually have an extraordinary financial advantage over disadvantaged communities. And this disparity can mean advantages in advertising, developing and enacting strategies, staff, lobbying, supporters, sponsoring feel-good civic projects to garner support, ability to launch and sustain expensive legal battles, offering campaign contributions and lawsuits to scare off opposition. Meanwhile, small communities have limited budgets to fight legal challenges. Fighting a project can be a significant drain on money that could have been spent on road repairs, schools, and community programs, etc. We hope that the draft EJ policy will address these disparities to communities challenging unjust corporate projects where these inequities can occur. My second comment is on the best science practices and decision making. You know, the possibility always exists that best science could be bypassed by the Coastal Commission when they accept that previous projects' faulty studies are valid. We hope that this is how approvals often get based on inadequate science, and this is how they happen. The serious challenges to a scientific methodology often arise, and the Coastal Commission, in its commitment to best practices, must be prepared to objectively and independently review what best science is. With enough money and motivation, science can be twisted and has been proven so, and many commercial interests to be suspect. Drug companies are a really good example of this, where their studies must be carefully scrutinized to prevent faulty, incomplete, and misleading conclusions. Ensuring the best science is used to determine a project is critical for gaining the confidence of a disadvantaged community. As I heard earlier today, better data, better decision making. Thank you very much.
I'm Lisa Berkeley, a resident of Marina. Thank you for extending your pre-lunch break for giving us a chance to speak. We in Marina wholeheartedly support the effort by the Coastal Commission to focus on the way in which coastal access and enjoyment have been unevenly based on race, socioeconomic status, and place of residence. Marina, we believe, has become disproportionately burdened over time with harmful industrial impacts of development in our coastal and inland areas. The Coastal Commission's commitment to protecting coastal natural resources and providing public access and lower-cost recreational opportunities for everyone is commendable. Ensuring that these opportunities are not denied on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, or place of residence is the responsible and just thing to do, and we really thank you for taking that into account in this policy. Disadvantaged communities, though, such as Marina, have community values equal to any other community. Because we may be of lower socioeconomic status or simply smaller in jurisdictional size does not mean that our same values, such as access to clean, affordable water or preserving sensitive habitats, having pristine beaches, or as affordable recreation or the promotion of economic welfare, should be secondary to those who live in more privileged environments. Nor should our community values be repeatedly ignored or dismissed in favor of the greater welfare of the wealthier or more politically connected neighbors. Presumably, this is why environmental justice exists, because for too long, privilege over disadvantage has been the predictable story. Please realize that if the story is to change, the environmental justice policy that you are developing must be given strength and credibility and possess clear and concrete guidelines and criteria. I thank you, and thank you again for your time.
So my name is Michael Baer. I'm from Carmel Valley now. I moved from Monterey, but I'm still on the Monterey Peninsula. Good afternoon. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to you, and as I've said before, here we are again. I have 2 points that I would like to make today on your environmental justice draft policy. I'd like to read from the draft policy handout, section 3, where it says, stakeholders have urged the Commission to view its role as an intermediary, as an advocate, as an ally on behalf of those communities, particularly when faced with opposition from powerful interests. I live in an advantaged community that is attempting to benefit at the expense of our neighboring disadvantaged community in Marina by claiming its resources while providing zero in compensation and risking potential catastrophic hazards to their future water supply. But my voice and those in my advantaged community who agree with me are also disadvantaged, and we also need you as an intermediary, as an advocate, and as an ally when faced with opposition from powerful interests. The powerful interests I'm talking about, are the hospitality and real estate industry in our community, which is acting in cahoots with the elected officials who act and speak on their behalf. Please don't forget us, the residential ratepayers who will pay 67% of the bill. The second point I'd like to make is about the outreach. I'd like to echo the comments of the other speakers. I was also able to attend that roundtable in Marina a couple of weeks ago. It's absolutely fabulous. It's hard to express how great it feels. I drive here for 3 or 4 hours to talk to you for 2 minutes. I got to drive for 15 minutes and have a conversation for an hour and a half. There were 14 people at that round table, and I'm pleased to say there were only 4 white men. It was a very diverse group, and it was the most I've ever felt listened to by the Coastal Commission. Sometimes I feel heard here, sometimes I don't feel heard here. But that community outreach was powerful. I hope we gave you some good input that night, and I encourage you to expand this outreach. And finally, in closing, from page 14, it says, staff will release a public engagement plan outlining the timeline, outreach, tools, and other details related to gathering feedback to further develop and refine the draft policy. I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
My name is Audra Walton, and I'm a resident of Marina. Disadvantaged communities pretty much distrust governmental processes and feel unable to make an impact on decisions that may already have been determined long before we get our 3 minutes of public comment. This is a common experience. The deck appears to be already stacked against us in most situations. We have 2 to 3 minutes to relay concerns on huge projects, complex issues, and often with great personal discomfort in speaking before commissions or boards. We are deterred from talking to commissioners because of concerns of ex parte communication, yet project affiliates and applicant staff are free to and do speak multiple times if the commissioners merely disclose that such communications have taken place. Meanwhile, the engagement process for project proponents has often been long-term and extensive over multiple contacts, while average citizens remain unaware of this. Residents of disadvantaged communities cannot track all the moving parts to the complex governmental process and cannot afford to appear before a commission for every issue. We may work full-time at low-paying jobs, have obligations for child care or elder care. We have financial and or time constraints, and just feeling that there is no point to showing up. When will public agencies and their constituents be able to engage with staff or commissioners prior to their minds being made up with the same access project applicants and their powerful allies have? This is a critical challenge that must be addressed if an environmental justice policy can be truly relevant and fair. And I'd also like to add that I also participated in the environmental justice discussion with the team, with the CCT, California Coastal Commission team that traveled down to Marina, and it was very awesome. And wow, that team, you guys give them a raise.
Yeah, I wonder if staff could give us just a little bit of context and orientation as to when the CalAmp project will come before the commission. And then I have a commenter.
Hi, I don't know precisely when that application is going to come before the commission, but I'm assuming it's sometime in 2019. This is a little distracting. So Tom Luster, who's the project lead on this, is actually going to be here on Friday morning when the commission is actually going to be considering an immaterial amendment that is related to the test well for that CalAmp project. So he might have a little bit more information that he could offer you on Friday morning on that, on scheduling, timing.
Thank you. And I just say, I do think the comments raise a good point about the environmental justice implications. And given our serious work on the environmental justice policy, I think this project represents an early potential application of that policy. And I'll be very interested in both the environmental justice policy discussion and when we consider this project of how we're able to actually apply the environmental justice policy. Thank you.
And I just want to use one of the public comments as a for instance. In that draft policy, which we are ready to circulate for public review at this point, in that strategic plan section, we do have an action that specifically is for staff to develop a checklist of criteria for determining when environmental justice is an issue that needs to be analyzed for a project. So that's an example of an action plan in the strategic plan update. We do have Ms. Biala's draft checklist that she sent around. We found it very thoughtful and quite comprehensive, and we've captured that to use when we develop our checklist for our agency, which is, as I said, one of the actions in the strategic plan.